Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Pope, and today I will be talking to you guys about communications in a Spanish business culture. Just a little introduction into Spain. Spain is geographically located in the southern European area, and it has European influences like the UK and France. However, it is also located by the Mediterranean Sea, so it has adapted to a lot of the Mediterranean traditions there. Still has a very good relationship with all of the countries around it, making business very, very easy with them. A very big thing when it comes to doing business in Spain is relationships and trust. They always will be important to everyone who you're doing business with in Spain. It is very common to kind of get to know your partners before you actually do business with them or do tasks. Same thing with new work. Like if you got a job in Spain, it is going to be common for you to have like lunch dates with your coworkers before you actually start the job. Decision making takes longer, however, because it is relationship driven, but they also want to be thorough. It's just the way that they do it. They want to make sure that there's no mistakes that could happen, that kind of stuff. So, moving into the communication style of Spain, Spain is a very high context country. What this means is that they rely on nonverbal cues like tone, gestures, eye contact. All of these are very important when you are communicating with someone who is from Spain or a business that is Spanish based. It's just you got to pay attention to all of the small things like eye contact. There might be physical touch, that kind of stuff. With that note, personal space is usually smaller in Spain. What I mean by that is in the US, we don't particularly, in business dealings, we don't particularly have physical contact with others besides like a handshake. However, in Spain, light touch is common. It's an easy way for relationships to start building, that type of thing. And emotions and personal talk, they blend very commonly with business talk just because they want to be able to trust you enough to do business with you, so they want you to know like more personable about themselves. When it comes to business practices, as I said earlier, handshakes, like in the US, are a signal of respect, but also just more personal contact physically is normal. Same thing with attire. They prefer business professional, but business casual is also acceptable because they want the workplace to feel like more relaxed, more like business discussions. When scheduling meetings and just schedules in general, they are very punctual. However, they are very flexible. If one person cannot make a meeting, they will reschedule that meeting to accommodate each person's schedule because it is very important to them that everyone is thought about and everyone has the time to take for the business or the meeting. Same thing when it comes to negotiations. Negotiations are usually calm and they're very trust-based. Like if you were, like I said, that's why you build your relationships with different businesses in Spain, is because negotiations, when you're trying to negotiate a deal or trying to buy out a company, it's very trust-based and they want to make sure that they are giving something to someone who they can trust and will not eventually like screw them over. Another large part of Spanish culture is something called a siesta, which translates to a nap. During the middle of the day, almost all businesses shut down for either 1 or 2 hours. Same thing with school. It happens with the children. Everything kind of just stops. People go home for an hour or two and they relax. Either they take a nap, they take time for themselves, but it's a way to keep people energized throughout the day. It is very common. However, the Spanish culture is leaning away from siestas and getting more into like a professional structure like the US. While speaking about the US, we can compare both these countries and how they're similar and different. The biggest similarities of the two countries is that they both value professionalism. As I said earlier, Spain is now leaning towards a more structural business without the siesta. They both value professionalism. However, even if Spain is more relaxed with how they present themselves, they're still very professional. Same thing when it comes to meetings. Is a very big thing is that people prefer in-person meetings just because it's easier to make eye contact, it's easier to get stuff done, and it's less likely that there's going to be a miscommunication that could happen, that type of thing. Also, as I said earlier, Spain is a very high context culture, and the US is a very low context culture. Spain prefers nonverbal cues to where people can kind of get everything from the least amount of words, where the US values when they're talking, they want all of the detail, they need to get everything from verbal communication. Same thing with expression. Spain is a lot more expressive than the US. The US prefers emotional neutrality. Spain is a very expressive country, as seen in all of their culture, their dance, their food. They love to express themselves in business as well, whether it be emotionally, socially, or physically. The US prefers emotional neutrality because it makes business go faster for them. Their emotions might get in the way of a business deal, so they prefer efficiency more than Spain prefers thorough. Some recommendations I would make for people who are going to do business in Spain or do it with a Spanish business is going to be paying attention to nonverbal cues is the biggest point that I can make for you. If you don't pay attention, you will be so lost when it comes to business deals, when it comes to tasks given to you. Just make sure that you're paying attention to hand gestures, eye contact, that type of stuff. Build trust before business discussions. If you're going to break a deal with someone who is from Spain or in a Spanish business culture, build the trust up, build the relationship up before you get into the business part of stuff, because that will make everything go a lot more smoothly. Clarify details frequently. A very large thing when it comes to Spain is that, yes, it is a high context culture, which means they will not need to get as much details. But when you are doing a task, a lot of times a Spanish worker who is in a business field will clarify details because they want to make sure everything is correct. It may be repetitive, it may be annoying, but that is what needs to be done. It's how they do it. Allow extra time for decision making. As I said earlier, they would like to be thorough. So if you have information about a decision that needs to be made in a while, get that information, start that process as soon as possible, so that way you can get that done as soon as possible. So a little bit of a review for everyone is the Spanish communication relies on relationships with context. That is the biggest point that will be in this slideshow, in my presentation. You need to build relationships and you need to understand the context built around the business community. Understanding cultural norms, that will prevent miscommunications, all that kind of stuff. It may be different for people in the US as it is for Spain. That's why understanding the norms that are in Spain will help you communicate better. And adapting to the communication styles, not just with Spain, but every country in general, will help everything go so much more smoothly. Same thing with building partnerships. If you adapt to their style of doing business, everything will go so much more better for you. And just generally, you'll have a better experience. Thank you for listening and watching me present my presentation. And I hope you all have a lovely experience with this. And I look forward to seeing your comments.